Hey YouTube, and welcome to another one of my YouTube videos. If you're new here, my name is Danika. I am learning how the internet works. I'm doing some different things on YouTube, some ASMR. I'm reading a book currently, and if you're interested in any of that, I would really appreciate a subscription or a comment and a like. So it does make a huge difference. Today I'm going to be reading the next two chapters of our book, So Be It. So if you're interested in that, just keep on watching. So we've read the first 5 chapters, so I will link in the description below the first video, which is chapters 1, 2, 3, and then I have chapters 4 and 5. It did take me quite a while to get through the chapters reading them out loud, so as I said in the last video, this is only going to be 2 chapters, so it'll be chapters 6 and 7. So far we have met Heidi. We've met Bernadette and we met Mama. We understand that Bernie is Heidi's neighbor. Mama has some kind of disability of sorts, so she doesn't speak very well. She only says, I believe it's 23 words, 26 words, something like that. It's a handful of words, so we're learning about the word "souf." We don't know what it means. I believe Heidi has just gone back from the pharmacy or the photo center, and she has an envelope of photos that she found. They've never looked at them before, so she's just got back to the apartment, and Bernie and Heidi are going to look at the photos. Hopefully they're of Mama, and we will get on with our story. Chapter 6 is called Tea. There were 23 photos in all, the same number Mama had words. Some of the pictures were so blurry you couldn't tell what they were, but plenty of them were clear. They were all taken at a Christmas party. There was a dressed-up Santa Claus with a white cotton beard and a crooked tree covered with paper chains and glitter pine cones that looked homemade. Some of the people in the pictures were walking around with trays of punch and cookies, and some were sitting in wheelchairs or slumped in orange and turquoise molded plastic chairs with thin metal legs. "Who are all these people?" I asked, slowly examining each photo before slipping it into the back of the stack. Bernie was sitting next to me on the couch, her head bent towards mine. "Looks like it could be some kind of a club, and this was their Christmas party," Bernie said. "Why are so many of them twisted up?" I asked. "Handicapped, you mean?" said Bernie. "Maybe it's a hospital or a special home." "Who took the pictures?" I asked. "Do you think Mama did?" "I doubt if she could use a camera, baby." "Then who took them, and how did Mama end up with a camera?" I asked. Bernie shook her head. "I don't know, sweetie." There were several pictures of a group of 3 plump teenage girls with dropping eyelids and ill-fitting party dresses. Then 2 of a shaggy-haired boy, about 18 or 19. His eyes were a beautiful dark blue, almost black, but his head seemed balanced at an odd angle on top of his thin neck. His mouth contorted in a grimace, which could have been either pain or pleasure. It was hard to tell. In one of the shots, the man in the Santa suit stood beside the boy, his arm around his shoulder, neither one smiling. The Santa was extremely tall and thin, and he hadn't bothered to pad the suit, so it billowed out loosely around the middle. His street clothes, shirt collar, necktie, and pant cuffs poked out from under the red and white costume, the sleeves so short that his bony wrist stuck out a good 3 inches from the white cuffs, revealing the gold watch he had on. "Pretty scrawny-looking Santa," I said. It's not the missing belly of jelly that bothers me. It's what his eyes are saying," Bernie said. "How can you tell under those big cotton eyebrows?" I asked. "I can tell," she said. After that, more snapshots of people posing in front of the tree and eating cookies. And then came a slightly blurry picture of a middle-aged blonde woman in a red sweater with reindeer on it standing in front of a massive stone fireplace, with her arm around a smiling girl with wide-set pale blue eyes. I knew right away the girl was Mama. "She was kind of fat," I said. "Or maybe she was pregnant," Bernie said. "With me, you mean?" I asked, looking hard at the photo. "Seems like a safe bet," she said, taking the picture from me and looking at it closely. "And my guess is that other woman in the red sweater is your Grammy." I grabbed the photo back from Bernadette and stared at the blonde woman. "Really? How do you know?" "Look at the eyes. What do you think, Heidi?" said Bernadette. "They look like Mama's, only not so wide apart." "They look like yours, baby," Bernadette said gently. We went through the whole stack of photos several times. Most of them were taken inside the room where the party was, but there was one taken outdoors, on a wooden porch under a big sign with green letters that read, "Hilltop Home, Liberty, New York." We have to follow the picture. We have to show the pictures to Mama as soon as she wakes up, I said excitedly. She knew these people, Bernie. She was there. Yes, she was, baby. But you know how your mama is. She might not be able to recognize herself from a photograph, especially an old one. Maybe looking at these will zap Mama's brain like a bolt of lightning and jumpstart her memory, Bernie. Then it hit me. Maybe Soof is in the pictures. Maybe, she said, but I could tell she had her doubts. While Mama finished napping, I let myself float suspended like a lily pad in my private little pool of hope. I passed by the time by looking up Liberty, New York in the atlas and pressing my finger down again and again on the town where Hilltop Home had been, the place where my mama and maybe my Grammy had stood in front of a big fireplace smiling at the camera. I wondered about who had taken the photographs and how Mama and I had ended up so far from New York. I wondered where my Grammy was now, and whether Hilltop Home was still there in Liberty. I was just about to go over to Bernie's and ask if we could call information to check for a listing when I heard Mama stir and call out. Bernadette had gone back to her apartment to feed her cats, Clara Barton and Cookie Dough, named after one of her heroes and one of my favorite flavors of ice cream. The cats never came through the door into Mama's and mine house. When they got hungry or lonely, they stood on the threshold and cried for Bernie. I used to worry that they did that because they had caught Bernie's AP, but she assured me it wasn't a catching thing for animals or people. When I heard Mama calling, I ran to the kitchen and shouted through the doorway, "Come quick, Bernie, she's up!" Bernadette came right over, and we went into Mama's room together. She was lying under her covers, rubbing her eyes. When she saw us, she smiled. "Hello, Heidi. Hello, Det." I remember the first time Mama called Bernadette Det. I thought Bernie was going to cry from sheer joy. Mama didn't add new words to her vocabulary very often, so each one was a big event in our house. That was a very special edition. It was number 15 on the list. "Hello, precious," Bernadette cooed as she sat down on the bed next to Mama and pushed her hair out of her eyes. "How did you sleep? How is your head?" Mama used to get a lot of headaches. She'd hold her head back and rock and moan. Usually a nap would make it better, but sometimes she needed Tylenol. She had trouble taking any kind of pills. She couldn't swallow them, so Bernadette would grind up the tablets and put the powder in Jell-O. Mama loved Jell-O almost as much as Juji fruits. "Can we show her now?" I whispered. "Shh, Heidi, slow down. She's only just waking up, and her head was hurting pretty bad before she went to sleep. Give her a second." I could barely contain myself as Bernadette sat by Mama, talking softly to her until she was awake enough to get up and go comb her hair and wash her face. Finally, Mama emerged from the bathroom and came to sit by me on the couch. "Hello, Heidi," she said, patting my knee. "Hello, Mama," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm and even. I looked at Bernadette and she shrugged. "Mama, do you want to see some pretty pictures?" I asked. She nodded. "They were taken a long time ago at Hilltop Home, Mama. Do you remember Hilltop Home?" Mama smiled and patted my knee. "Hello, Heidi," she said. "Hello, Mama." I picked up the stack of photographs and chose one, holding it carefully by the edges so I wouldn't smudge it. "Look, Mama, see the Santa Claus?" Mama looked at the photograph and smiled. I showed her another one. "See all the people?" Mama looked at the photograph and smiled. Bernadette came over and looked over my shoulder at the picture I was showing Mama. "Don't they look pretty, precious?" she asked. Mama said, "Pretty, Det." "Look at this one, Mama. Who do you see?" I showed her the photograph of the girl and the woman in the red sweater in front of the fireplace. Mama looked at the photograph and smiled. "Soof," she said. My heart nearly stopped. "Where, Mama? Show me Soof." I was barely able to contain my excitement. "Tea, Heidi?" Mama said suddenly, smoothing her skirt and nervously with both hands. "Wait, Mama, not yet. First, show me Soof." Mama began to smooth her skirt faster. "Tea, Heidi," she said, her voice raising up a notch. "I don't want any tea, Mama. I want you to show me Soof. Point to Soof," I said. I was talking louder than I meant to be, louder than I should have been, and I felt Bernadette reach out and touch my shoulder. "Leave your Mama be now, Heidi. She'll show us when she's ready to." "No, she won't," I said, shrugging out from under Bernadette's hand and pulling Mama's hands roughly away from her skirt. I took her right hand tightly in my own, forced her index finger out straight, and pressed it against the photo. "Show me, Mama. Where is Soof?" "That's enough, Heidi," said Bernadette. "Show me, Mama," I demanded. Uh-oh, Mama repeated anxiously, wriggling as she tried to escape my grip. "Tea, Heidi? Tea?" I don't want any tea, I shouted. I want you to tell me, Mama. I want to know. She whimpered. Done, 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 Heidi. Shh, she said. Leave your mama be, Heidi, Bernadette said sternly. You're not ever going to tell me, are you, Mama? I shouted, ignoring Bernadette. Are you, Mama? Are you? I let go of her hand and angrily ripped the photo in half, throwing the pieces in Mama's lap. Then I ran to my room, slammed the door, and with a jagged sob, flung myself face down on the bed. I cried for a long time. I cried so hard it felt like my ribs might crack open. I imagined my heart flying out like a small red bird escaping its cage, going off in search of a more promising person to live in, a person with a history, a person who knew. After a while, I heard my door open and Bernadette and Mama come in. Your Mama's made some tea for you, Heidi, just the way you like it. Sit up, baby, and take it from her, will you please? She needs you to, Bernadette said quietly. I dried my eyes and sat up. Mama looked so worried and sad standing there with my white cup with the pink roses in her hand. I took it from her hand and tried to smile. Thank you, Mama. Thank you for the tea. Good, Heidi. Tea, she said, brightening immediately. Then she turned and walked out of the room. Where are you going, precious? Bernadette called after her. Mama reappeared a second later holding the two halves of the photograph I'd torn. Uh-oh, she said, handing me the pieces. Soof. Slowly, I got up off the bed and went and stood beside her. Which one, Mama? Which one is Soof? Show me. With my right hand, I held out the piece of the photograph that showed Mama as a young girl. Or this one? I asked, holding out the other piece of the photo. Mama looked at me and smiled. Then she reached over and clumsily pushed the two pieces together. Tea, Heidi? She said. Ugh, that's so hard. I can't imagine just wanting to know who you are and being fortunate enough to have a lovely neighbor or a lovely guardian like Bernadette and trying. And I really relate to the idea of just wanting to know who you are and where you came from and if there's anything special about you or me, or I think it's good to know who you are. And I definitely understand and relate a lot to Heidi's frustrations in this chapter. Chapter 7 is called Out. Until I had that old roll of film developed and saw the sign with the green letters on it hanging over the porch, I had never heard of Liberty, New York. It's not exactly a famous place. Just a small town in the Catskill Mountains, about 2.5 hours north of New York City. But because I knew that my mother and maybe my grandmother too had been there, suddenly it became the most important place in the world. If Mama was truly pregnant with me in the picture, that meant the photos had been taken almost 13 years earlier. I was afraid that Hilltop Home wouldn't still be there, but Bernadette got the number from information without any problem, and we called them up. I stood next to Bernadette, firing questions at her a mile a minute as she spoke to the person on the other end of the phone. Ask them if Mama lived there. Tell them she was at a big Christmas party, and maybe her mom too. Bernadette tried to ask all those questions and more, but for some reason, the person on the other end wouldn't let her finish a sentence. Yes, I understand, but if you could just tell me if... Yes, I see, but all we really need you to do is look into your records. Is that too much too? Uh-huh. Okay. Finally, Bernadette gave her phone number and hung up. What happened? What did they say? I asked. About all I managed to get out of her was that Hilltop is a home for handicapped people, and the only person authorized to answer personal questions about it is somebody named Thurman Hill. Then we need to talk to Herman Hill right away, I said. He isn't in there today. She took my number and said that he'd called me back. But Thurman Hill didn't call back, not that day or the next. So Bernadette called again and again. Every time she got the same runaround about how Mr. Hill was the only one who could answer our questions, only he wasn't ever there. Bernadette called back so many times. Finally, the woman at Hilltop started putting her on hold as soon as she heard Bernie's voice, and then she'd just leave us hanging like that and never come back. Long distance is expensive, Heidi-ho, and Thurman Hill, that miserable 4-letter word, clearly doesn't intend to return our phone calls. Bernadette never swore in front of me, so when she got really mad, she substituted 4-letter word for the real 4-letter curses. I knew all the real ones from Xander anyway. I'd even made a list of them in code in my notebook. I think it's time for postal approach, she said. Bernadette had a lot of practice getting what she wanted by talking to people on the phone or writing them letters, but no matter what she did, she couldn't get anywhere with Hilltop. 3 weeks passed, and still we had no answers to our letters or calls. I was beside myself. Bernie tried to distract me by keeping my hands busy. We put a new shelf paper in the kitchen cabinets, and one weekend she sent me out cleaning all the closets in our apartment. I was on my hands and knees, pulling out boxes and squashed shoes and battered old suitcase from the back of Mama's closet, when I felt something soft wadded up in the far corner under a stack of old magazines. It was a moth-eaten red sweater, the same red sweater with reindeer on it that the blonde woman in the photograph at a hilltop home had been wearing. She was here, Bernie, I cried, holding up the crumpled sweater for her to see. My Grammy was here. There's proof. After that, there was no distracting me. I couldn't think about anything but Hilltop. All we're asking them to do is just look up your mama's name in the files. Why is that so hard, I asked. I don't know, baby, but it makes me so mad. I'd like to march right into Thurman Hill's stuffy old office and sit on the little piss ant until he coughs up the information. That's it, Bernie, I said, jumping up excitedly. That's exactly what we have to do. We have to go see Thurman Hill. We have to go there and make him tell us about Mama. Baby, Bernadette said softly, you know we can't do that. I can't. Go out? How do you know? How do you know you can't? I asked. When's the last time you tried, Bernie? Maybe the AP is gone. Maybe you're better and you just don't know it. It's not gone, Heidi. Things don't just go. Colds do, and pimples. How do you know AP doesn't just go too? Maybe it does. Maybe it has, I said. I was really excited now. I went to the front door and pulled it wide open. Come on, Bernie, please try. Try. For me. Heidi, I can't, Bernadette said. Her voice was tight, and I noticed her hands trembling. You make Mama try. That's why she can open hands, Bernie, and comb her hair. You make me try too. Cursive? Bernie? Shakespeare? You make me try. That's all I'm asking you to do, is try. Bernadette stood up, grasping the arm of the couch for support. Her legs wobbled under her, but she made her way slowly towards me, toward the open door. I don't know, she said. You don't understand, Heidi. If I go out, if I'm outside, I might... If I go out, nothing will happen, Bernie. Just one step into the hall. That's all you have to do. One step. The first step. Like when you taught me the cursive A, remember? Round the block, up, down, curl the tail onto the next. You can do it, Bernie. I know you can. Bernadette took hold of the doorknob, her knuckles white with fear. She stood like that for a minute with her eyes closed tight. Round the block, up, down, curl the tail onto the next, she whispered, under her breath. Round the block, up, down, curl the tail onto the next. Then she took a deep breath, let go of the doorknob, and stepped out into the hall. You did it, I shouted. You're out, Bernie. I knew you could do it. You're out. The best way to describe what happened next is that in the few seconds between when Bernadette let go of the knob and when she collapsed on the floor, her body went from solid to liquid. Her legs juiced out from under her and she fell in a heap, her breath coming out loud and fast, her eyelids fluttering as her head rolled backward like a broken doll's. Bernie, I cried, rushing to her. Save me, she managed to whisper between gasps. I'm drowning. I stood behind her, taking hold of her under the arms and trying with all my might to pull her back inside, but she was too heavy. Bernie was short but not small. Peasant stock, she always said, low to the ground and built for business. Help me, Heidi, she groaned. I heard a door scrape open below us and familiar heavy footsteps up the stairs. Xander, I screamed, hurry up here, we need help. A minute later, Xander's pasty round face peered around the top of the staircase. He was out of breath from climbing one flight up. He had a bag of barbecue chips in one hand and a grape soda in the other. His jaw dropped when he saw Bernadette on the floor. Geez, he said, what's the matter with her? Hurry, help me pull her inside, I said. He didn't move. He just stood there nervously, licking his spicy red fingertips. Man, she's white, he said, like a freaking ghost. Xander, come on, I cried. Help me get her inside. Xander sighed and put his chips and soda down. Then he came and took one of Bernie's arms in his hands. She's not going to croak, is she? He whispered, 'cause I ain't never seen anybody croak in real life. I grabbed Bernie's other arm and started pulling. One leg of her stockings caught on a nail on the floor and ripped loudly as we tugged. She moaned and went completely limp, which made her feel even heavier. But somehow, eventually, we managed to drag her across the welcome mat back inside. She don't look so good. Do you want me to call 911? He asked. I was terrified, But if we called 911, they'd come and take Bernie away. What would Mama and I do? How would we survive without Bernie? I started to cry. Xander stood for a minute, looking down at Bernie's still body and shifting uncomfortably from foot to foot. Is she drunk? He asked. Because if that's what it is, I can tell you she won't wake up for a while. And when she does, you gotta keep real quiet and make her drink hot coffee even if she curses you out for it. You got coffee? Yeah, but she's not drunk, I said, wiping my nose on my sleeve. It's okay. I won't tell nobody, said Xander. I felt a sliver of truth slip under my skin, a jagged little splinter of what lay underneath all those tales about war heroes and medals of honor. Bernie stirred and moaned. Xander quickly knelt down next to me, and we both fanned her furiously with her hands as she came around. Please be okay, I whispered. Please, Bernie, come back. It seemed like forever before the color returned to Bernie's face and she opened her eyes. I sat beside her on the floor the whole time, stroking her arm and talking softly to her, the way she always did with Mama when she was waking up from one of her headache naps. When Bernadette was finally able to sit up, I sat cross-legged and scooched very close, putting one arm around her and pressing her head against my shoulder while I rocked gently back and forth. Some of her long gray hair had come loose from the thick rope of braids she always wore, and I smoothed it away from her face, tucking it back into the weave. Done, 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 Bernie. Shh, I whispered. Xander propped himself up against the door and watched. He didn't say or do anything after that, but it was enough that he stayed. When Bernie was able to sit up and drink some water, he left, closing the door quickly behind him. I'd spent hours with Xander, listening to him tell stories out on the stoop, but until that day, I hadn't really known him. Then, just like with the first pack of Twinkies he'd given me, without my asking, he handed me a tiny scrap of truth. After that, everything changed. He would never be fat or dim-witted in my eyes again. I was only just beginning to see how powerful the truth could be. Luckily, Mama was asleep when the incident with Bernadette happened. I'm not sure how she would have reacted if she'd seen Bernie all fall to pieces like that. I know it scared me down to my roots. I'm sorry, baby, she said. I tried. I know you did, Bernie. It's okay, I told her. I shouldn't have asked you to. After a while, we went into the kitchen, and Bernie tried to make herself a cup of coffee, but she was still pretty shaky. Sit down, Bernie. I'll do it for you, I said. Bernadette sat down heavily on one side of the kitchen chairs and watched me grind beans in the coffee mill. An old beat-up wooden box with a crank on top and a drawer on the bottom where the ground coffee fell in. I loved to pull open the drawer and smell the mysterious dark brown powder, but I hated the bitter taste. I preferred Mama's sweet tea. Bernadette drank 5 cups of coffee every day. 3 in the morning, 1 after lunch, and 1 at 5 o'clock, which is what she called the cocktail hour. It's the devil's brew, Heidi. 1 sip and you're a goner. You're not gone, I'd say. True enough. But I'm a slave to the bean, Heidi. Trust me, a slave. While we waited for the water to boil, I sat down across from her at the table. We won't give up on Hilltop, Heidi, I promise. We'll keep after them, she said. We'll call and write until somebody up there gives us some answers. We will. But I knew in my heart that wasn't going to work. Thurman Hill clearly planned to let us swing in the breeze. When I looked over at Bernie, still pale and shaken from her single step outside, I knew there was only one thing to do. Bernadette, I'm going to Liberty, I said. You? You mean alone? She said incredulously. That is totally out of the question. You're just a baby. I'm not a baby. I'm 12. I go out by myself all the time, I said. Not to New York, you don't. I can fly there, I said. Have you lost your senses, girl? People fly all the time, Bernie. All those planes we hear going by every day are filled with people. Other people, strangers, but not you. You're not like them, she said. No, Bernie, I'm not like you, I said hotly. You and Mama are the ones who match. Color rose in her cheeks, her back visibly stiffened. I would no more let you get on an airplane than I would cut off my own foot, she said. Fine, I'll take a bus. It'll be cheaper anyway. Bus or plane, it makes no difference. You're not going. And that's the end of the discussion. Bernie had a stubborn streak that ran the length of her spine like the white stripe on a skunk. She taught me pretty much everything I knew, but there was one thing I knew that Bernie didn't. I was going to Liberty. Oh my goodness. I can't believe it. That's one of my favorite chapters to read because things start going from like a happy, kind of stable place to little bits of the truth start popping out. So we get a couple clues. I'm really excited to see how Heidi gets to Hilltop. If she ends up speaking with Thurman Hill, Will Mama come? Will Barney come? I guess we'll find out in the next video. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'm so excited to keep reading this book and hear your feedback. So I will see you in the next one. Thanks again.